Welcome to the 5D Codes. I'm Sarah Teresa, your host, a writer, sound healer, nature lover, mother, and most importantly, chronicler of the liminal space, the in-between, the edge where ordinary life starts to get strange and honest at the same time. This podcast is where I process out loud and take you from 3D physical reality into 5D, the fifth dimension, a dimension beyond time and space where true love is the foundation of everything. In the conversations we have here, we explore how to embody that pure love dimension more solidly, how to integrate what we know as the physical realm into the ongoing spiritual realm our soul already exists in, how to bridge the two. Perhaps that's the human experience in and of itself. Perhaps that's what we're all trying to figure out here. And this is me, figuring it out with you, the listener. I'm so glad to have you. We're going to stop our sound healing background here, and we're going to walk home together during this podcast. Right now, I'm coming to you from the heart of Rochester, New York. I am dog and cat sitting once again. I have a full month of bookings because of spring break. I'm watching a golden retriever and a tuxedo cat right now. My daughter's great aunt's animals, actually. And it's really great to be recording this in this house because my daughter's great aunt is a writer as well. She's an artist and she's a chronicler of the liminal space too in her own way, just like I am. It's always great to live in other people's homes. Hey, I can record a podcast episode just on that, but maybe that's what my book's about, because we all have energy, our own unique soul imprint. I've talked about this in other episodes, that I really feel like it's our own note, that, my soul has its own musical note that no one else on this planet has. And same for you. So when you're staying in somebody else's house, it's like you're immersing yourself in their own frequency, their musical note. And it's a different experience. And this is what I experience when I'm traveling. And this is what this episode's about. We're going to go on a timeline leap together. When we experience this shift in our reality as we know it, it feels like we are time traveling. For me, the best way to understand awakening, and I really mean the best way, better than any book, any framework, better than anything I could hand you as a concept, is through true real life story. Okay, so that's what this is. And today we're going to have an actual account of a timeline leap that I experienced, two actually, on a real Tuesday afternoon. Because that's how this works sometimes. The universe has to reschedule you before you're ready to receive what it's trying to give you. I really think we go through many of these timeline leaps, and a lot of people that I know that are kind of chronicling their own awakening journey have talked about feeling like sometimes it's the small details. Here's the storyteller coming out that start to shift. Butterfly effect plays in here, right? Bernstein Bears was written a certain way. And why is the spelling of Bernstein Bears different than I remember it in the 80s? I wish I had some of my books. That would be a timeline leap, my friends. When the small details, it's really easy to bypass those or, talk them away. But when you really pay attention to the fine details, it's like, wait a minute, why does my face look a little fuller? My skin is a little clearer lately. And this is the honest truth about what I'm experiencing. My physical body has shifted since I've made this timeline leap. So I really think that we're going through many of these leaps right now, like an uncountable amount of them. I think if we do try to count, sometimes we try to keep tabs on everything, we might go crazy, Really, what we're doing, we're going to embrace the multiverse theory, or at least I am for this episode, so join me on this. Imagine, a teacher of mine said this years ago, it's like every version of yourself exists. The version that decided to go to this place for lunch, and the version that decided to stay home and make lunch, right? We have how many decisions that we can make throughout the day. Think, if you had 5 decisions you could make about a certain a certain moment, right? And you chose one of them. Well, what about those other 4 options? There's a version of you that exists. It can be really trippy to think about this, but this teacher said to me, it's like this, Sarah. Imagine that there are a million chess games, and I would say, honestly, even be more than that, happening at once. That's the multiverse, How many versions of you exist? There's a show, because I love story, if you're interested in watching it on a streaming service, I can't remember if it's on Netflix or Amazon Prime, it's called Being Erica, Erica, Canadian show. My daughter and I ended up watching it a couple of years ago, essentially playing on the multiverse. And this woman, Erica, experiences these different versions of herself when she makes different decisions. And I think it's really, really well done. It's like very simply done. I think it's very high vibrational, and it plays into this multiverse theory. So when we go through a timeline leap, it's really like we're traveling into different versions of ourselves that are getting closer to our most soul embodied, our most 5th dimensional version of ourselves. Because ultimately, I feel like that's what we're here for. That's what enlightenment is. It's like, how can I be the highest version, the most soul embodied version of myself? Think about this. When we chose to come to this planet, we literally chose to forget everything. We came here as this very awake soul, squeezed into this tiny human body, and part of the agreement was you're going to forget all your soul wisdom. And your whole goal during this human experience is to remember. And that's why I love Ram Dass and his book, Be Here Now, and his mantra, remember. I lived in his community, Lama Foundation, and we would make flags, screen print these flags that just had the words remember with this circle on them. That in and of itself is like a mantra to like trigger the subconscious mind to remember that you know everything. You have all the wisdom. You have all the answers inside of you. You are God. You are the oversoul. How do we forget that over time? Well, we agreed, right, to forget. And then these timeline leads happen, and we all of a sudden start to feel like more embodied in who we truly are. It's like a timeline shift happens, and all of a sudden I feel like I remember more. I'm more embodied. I'm more present in who I truly am as a soul having a human experience. It's like my ego diminishes a little bit. Ego is pure fear energy. The soul is pure unconditional love energy. To get the soul to, I guess, how do I say this? Fully embody itself in this human form, which is encompassed by this ego, and the body, which is a really dense, like low vibration 3D temple, if you will. That takes a lot of soul power. The soul is expansive. It's timeless and it's spaceless. So to squeeze it into this little human body is not an easy task. So let's go on this little journey and explore this through the story of a timeline leap that I experienced. Well, it starts, as many things do, with a Tuesday that I wasn't ready for. I had an ortho appointment for my knee. I booked it weeks earlier, and then, the way things go, I'd half forgotten it. It floated somewhere in the back of my mind, not quite anchored. And on the day of, I arrived 20 minutes past my time. Oops, 20 minutes. Now, most doctor's offices give you like a 10-minute buffer, not 20. How did I get it wrong? I kept turning that over and over in my head. The time was in my phone, depend on my Google Calendar. I looked at it that morning, and then somehow between looking and arriving, something slipped. In truth, and I've learned to be honest with myself about these things, I just wasn't ready. Not for the appointment, not for what the appointment was going to ask of me. My body knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. And so my body, in its infinite wisdom, made me late. And this is where I feel like the soul's taking over. So they rescheduled me for the following week. Now, I was annoyed with myself, feeling very human in that moment. That's the honest truth. And I guess that particular flavor of frustration, that's really just self-directed impatience, that old familiar pattern. Why can't I just get it together? Why does this keep happening? What is wrong with me? I know that pattern. It's a loop. I know the specific weight of it. It settles in my chest. And then as I drove away, I merged onto the road and let the frustration move through me. That's when I got the message. This wasn't the day you were supposed to be there, Sarah. Trust that. Something loosened, not completely, but just enough. And I don't know about you, but this happens to me when I'm just doing something mindless, like driving, right? And I'm kind of on autopilot. That's when I get into that liminal space, and I'll maybe notice a song on the radio. And I do believe a song came on that just had a message like Let It Be, by the Beatles. That was just like your validation that this is exactly as it's supposed to be. So here's what I've come to understand about the shadow work part of this, that timeline leaps require shadow work. Often they happen after we have been triggered by something. They really don't happen without the shadow work. So it's like you need some sediment stirred up to get to the bottom of what's going on, what you've been sitting with. The frustration is the sediment. Impatience for me was the sediment. It was that old story of what's wrong with me is sediment. I needed it stirred up. And trust me, it wasn't pleasant. It never is, right? Who wants to go through that suffering? But I really needed to feel it move through my system up toward the surface where I could actually look at it. I needed a whole week to do it, actually. The universe wasn't punishing me for having me be late. It was literally giving me a week to clear the sediment. And hindsight's 20/20, right? So the following Tuesday, here we go. Just another Tuesday where I had an ortho appointment. I was rushing my daughter and my nephew to my mom's, that particular focused chaos of getting kids out the door and into the car. Like, did you eat? Where are your shoes? We have to go. So I could get there on time. I was like extra intense about getting there on time after being late the first time. And lo and behold, I got them to my mom's and I got there 5 minutes early. I actually got to sit down and chill in the waiting room, which honestly rarely ever happens to me. The doctor was ready to see me exactly on time, which is another rare occurrence. And she was honestly a lovely person. It was like a very pleasant visit. I walked out thinking, what was I so anxious about, right? That question sat with me, and what was I so anxious about? And underneath it, quieter, what was I not ready to hear last week that I'm ready to hear now? I can feel my throat buzzing as I say that, because here is what the doctor handed me. Fresh x-rays of both of my knees spread across a light board, her pointing at things I could see but not yet name as mine. And then a new word, osteoarthritis. There is a moment, if you've ever received a new diagnosis, a new word, a new thing that you have to hold on to about your own body, you know this moment when you are still holding it before your mind has decided what to do with it. It's not fear exactly. It's not grief exactly. It's more like suspension. The word is in your body, but it hasn't landed yet. It's still just floating there, loose in your chest, waiting for you to tell it what it means. I got in the car in that state. I merged onto the highway with the word still loose in my chest, turned the radio on, almost without thinking. And here we go. The radio said it back to me. A chiropractor, mid-sentence, talking about laser treatments for osteoarthritis. My word, my knee, my Tuesday, coming through the speakers before I'd even made it to the on-ramp. And I know this person, the chiropractor, not well, but enough to know that he isn't the one for me. The treatment isn't for me. And yet here he is, arriving through static and signal, saying the exact word I'd just been given. Like the universe picked up the other line, and it always does. I didn't turn toward it, I just received it. This is not coincidence, my friend. This is a frequency change announcing itself. In that moment, I had this trippy experience where I felt like I was present but not present. It was like I was in my body and out of my body. That is what I feel when I'm experiencing a timeline leap. Most people miss this part. When the chiropractor came through the radio saying osteoarthritis, literally as my mind was thinking it, he wasn't telling me to book an appointment. He was telling me I'd been heard. There's a difference, and learning to feel it changes everything, okay? Instructions have next steps. Acknowledgements have something quieter and more enduring. The confirmation that you are held inside something that knows your name and your knee and the question you've been carrying since before you knew it was a question. The universe is not a GPS. It doesn't reroute you. It witnesses you. It says, yes, we know, keep driving. And then it puts skateboards on the curb of the street you grew up on for the daughter who asked for one. You receive it or you don't. That's the whole practice. And that literally did happen that day. And when I picked up my daughter and my nephew, we drove down the street I grew up on as a shortcut on the way to take care of some cats I was watching. And lo and behold, there were 4 skateboards sitting on the curb. A timeline leap is like the radio dial. The station you've been listening to your whole life starts producing static. Slowly at first, a little interference, a little distortion, the signal dropping in and out. You keep turning it up. You keep trying to find the frequency you know. And then one day you're driving home from the doctor with a new word in your body and something in you just turns the dial. Like that's what it feels like. It's a station that you've never heard before. It's coming in so clear, playing something you didn't know you needed until it was already inside you. That's what a timeline leap feels like. It's not a departure, it's a tuning. Here's what nobody tells you about timeline leaps. You have to earn the reception. Here's the shadow work. Not through suffering. You've likely already done plenty of that, my friend, but through attention, fine-tuned, painstaking, unglamorous attention to the small details of yourself. The moment you override your own hesitation to make someone else comfortable, the way your energy shifts when you walk into a certain room, the specific quality of exhaustion you feel after spending time with someone who never once asked how you were, these are data points. Most people scroll past them. The work is learning to stop and read them. I thought I had done this work years ago. When I was a yoga teacher, I was deeply attuned to my body, more than most people will ever be, to be honest. I could feel the subtle shifts, the places where breath wouldn't go, the way emotion lived in my tissue. My intuition started opening up in ways that surprised me. And then I became a Reiki master and something cracked wider. The psychic channel opened. I started receiving information I couldn't explain through ordinary means. I thought, this is it. I'm tuned in. I'm paying attention. But there were blind spots that I couldn't see yet. Not because I wasn't trying, but because the deepest ones aren't visible until you do a specific kind of work. And that work for me turned out to be about codependency. We all have to find our own work. And that's where knowing thyself is the answer, right? To thine own self be true, said Shakespeare. I didn't love that word at first, codependency. It felt clinical, shameful in a way I couldn't quite articulate. But somebody I trusted told me that my tendency to merge with others, to attune so completely with another person to what another person needed, that I lost the thread of what I needed, and I'm even losing my words as I say this, so perfect example, wasn't a character flaw, but it was my highly empathic nature's default setting. And underneath that default, they said, was a trauma response. Honestly, I believe them because when I looked honestly at my history, and I mean really looked, the way you look at something you've been carefully not looking at for years, I could see it. The complex PTSD diagnosis I eventually received didn't arrive quickly. It took a long time to be open enough with a therapist to describe what I was actually experiencing. It honestly took a letting go of pride as well. I don't love putting things in boxes, but sometimes the box gives the ego something to work with. And that's what this one did. It gave me permission to stop being ashamed of something I'd been carrying for so long. The way trauma had rooted itself in my nervous system, the way it surfaced in my relationships, the way I kept finding myself depleted and resentful and confused about how I'd gotten there again and again. Because from the outside, it looked like giving, right? And giving is good. That's what I thought. But this wasn't giving from fullness. This was giving from fear. And this is, for me, a huge trigger for this timeline leap. Because for years, I was constantly outputting my energy. And I, even a couple years ago, had a partner that was like, kind of pushed me to teach yoga. I attracted a lot of codependent relationships too. Codependency is all about control. That other person trying to control me trying to control them. Well, you should be teaching yoga. You haven't taught it in so long. You're so good at it, blah, blah, blah. And so somehow I felt like I wanted to please this person because that was a common pattern for me in relationships. I reached out to a studio locally to teach, and I taught a couple sessions of yoga. And I found every time I had to teach, I was so exhausted. At that point, my own unprocessed trauma had come out in, what Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body. I like that term. And I was experiencing basically chronic fatigue and exhaustion. And instead of giving myself the permission to rest, I pushed myself to give because that was my default setting, right? So basically my nervous system spent years cycling through this freeze, fight, flight, and most commonly fawn, the people pleasing. If you don't know the fawn response, it's really this. You make yourself agreeable, accommodating, and pleasurable to be around because some part of you learned early that keeping the peace was how you stayed safe. You don't rock the boat. You smile when you don't feel like smiling, aka masking. And you say yes when every cell of your body is saying no. You hand someone a version of yourself that isn't quite true in that moment because you've calculated, usually unconsciously, that it's safer than the alternative. At the core of that, you're willing to be honest about it. It's kind of lying, It's not malicious lying, but it's survival lying. Still, it's lying nonetheless to the other person and more damagingly to yourself. And I actually just published a podcast yesterday with Jared Ray Gilmore. It's season 3, episode 7, but I recorded this 2 years ago. In 2024, it was one of my first podcast interviews. I started this podcast out wanting to have conversations with people that were really authentic. Jared has a really big following on Instagram, like over 100,000 people, which, I don't buy into all the matrix numbers, but I really paid attention to him and his page. And I actually had a couple sessions with him when he was offering these session deals. He's a Jungian coach and he's done the work. I paid attention to his story. He's actually a recovering alcoholic. He uses 12 steps. So he's got his own codependency recovery. And I had started my codependency recovery at that time. And Jared and I talked about some of the masking and the authenticity piece and the how difficult it is, even on social media. Even if you have a so-called authentic platform, it's still challenging because this is, for him, it's his living. So go back and listen to that episode if this topic interests you and you want to dive deeper. But I really appreciated that Jared was candid and said, I still struggle with masking. If I'm interested in a woman, there's times when I want to have certain interests because she has them. It is really hard to be honest sometimes. For me, and that's what I did, I guess, in this relationship. I wanted to appease this person. They wanted to do events together. They did some sound healing. I did yoga. It was a way for us to bond and connect, but I was lying to myself and I was lying to that person because I just didn't have it to give. And I would spend time with this person I was dating when I literally had no energy left to give. I was giving everything to my job at that point. I was a mental health coach and my daughter was going through her own mental health struggles. And I was really running on fumes. And I would perform okayness, warmth, presence. And then honestly, I would leave my partner's company and I would collapse, like not metaphorically, literally collapse. And sometimes for days, I just had absolutely no energy. I ended up losing 15 pounds. I'm 5'8", about 130. I dropped below 115, which is really low for my body, my height and my body mass index. And it was really because of the overgiving. It literally felt like my physical energy, the physical mass of my body was being taken because I had nothing else to give. Like I didn't have the mental and emotional energy. It was very symbolic. So I really felt like I didn't know how else to be. This was kind of a bottom that I hit a couple years ago. Like nobody had demanded I perform or forced me to show up. I chose it. I admitted that to myself. And it's honestly taken a couple years to take that inventory and admit nobody else is responsible for my actions but me. Why would I choose it? That's what the question that I asked myself. It was like this part of me was so frightened that this was how I have to be to stay safe. I don't know any other way to be. And then I would start to feel this resentment. I would feel it towards the other person. I held on to resentment towards this ex for years. I blamed him. And I know that wasn't fair, but that's all I knew. It was really hard for me to put the focus on myself, right? I didn't know how to trace it back to the source. It took me these last few years, really. And I think that when I started working with Jared, when I had those couple sessions before I had the podcast with him, I was able to see things about myself from the Jungian perspective, because personality systems really resonate for me, that helped me understand even my relationship with my daughter and where she and I might clash, and honestly not take it personally, but also realize I am somebody, this is where getting to know thyself is so powerful. So putting this out there to the listener, open up, pray to your higher self, pray to God, the oversoul, universe, call it what you will. How can I show up for myself more? What would help me know myself more? I was blessed with the Enneagram, a book in my 20s, and then human design, and then the Jungian personality system. And it really helped hound in, I need a lot of introspection time. I need a lot of time and space, actually, to just reflect and go inward. And because of the exhaustion I've experienced over the years by overgiving, to rest, to get into that relaxed nervous system state, which is the liminal space, right? So I was the one really making a decision to spend time with people when I had nothing left to give. Okay, I was the one pretending to have a capacity I didn't have until I couldn't anymore. And that's the honest answer. The one that required the most courage to sit with was that most of the people that I was doing this with, honestly, weren't safe enough to receive my truth. I thought, we were on the same level, but I was lying, right? I was masking, I wasn't being my true self. And so I attracted somebody that resonated with that vibration. So when I did pull down my mask, most of the time those people were gone. They were not even in my life anymore. Like attracts like. And trust me, I had plenty of conversations in my head. Maybe you do this too with those people. Like, if I run into them, this is what I would say, Most likely though, because they were drawn to me in a state of chronic exhaustion and masking, they were doing the same thing themselves. They were unable to meet me in that place of true authenticity, So they were not putting the shame on them, because I was doing it too. They were takers. I had attracted takers, right? And because some part of me understood on that frequency below conscious thought that takers would never ask me to show up as myself. They'd take whatever I offered and not ask questions, which meant I never had to be real, right? So I am going to attract a frequency that aligns with what I'm offering. As somebody that was used to giving, this is the addictive relationship cycle, the codependent cycle. You tend to attract, codependents tend to attract addicts, and most of my partners in my life had been addicts. Some of them had been in recovery, maybe they were drinkers at one point and they stopped alcohol, but they still had the addictive personality. And Jared and I had a pretty candid conversation about that in the podcast too, because, an addict, and he was a pretty intense drug addict in recovery, that's a lifelong process. Just like I know for myself as a codependent, it's never going to be out of my system. It's just something that's in my conscious awareness. And it's really humbling, to have that, I guess, to admit to that truth. It's even hard to talk about it. As you can tell, I'm stumbling. So it really there was a bargain, and it was costing me everything. And then the fine tuning began when I started catching myself in that moment of choice. Not after the collapse, not in the resentment, but in the actual instant when I was about to override myself. And instead of overriding, I paused and I asked, is this true? Do I actually have this energy to give now? And this happened with yoga, for example. When I ended that relationship with the person that I felt, there was just a lying back and forth, lying energy. And had just finished a session of yoga, and the studio had asked me to do another session. And I had to ask myself, do I have the energy to give? And the answer was no. So I said no. And I felt like I got a piece of myself back. And I started my YouTube channel. I started doing more nature therapy videos and found ways that really filled me up, including writing again, that I had let go of because I was denying parts of my authentic self. And coming back to the timeline leap, this all connects. So as we fully embody our soul, we are fully embracing who we are as our own unique musical note on this planet. I was trying to play somebody else's note. That's never going to feel harmonic. It's always going to feel discordant until I admit the truth. I'm trying to fit in. I was feeling alone. I wanted a relationship. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to have to sacrifice parts of myself to have a relationship, because that was a belief that I had in, let's say, the old timeline. Not to say that belief is gone, but when you embody more of who you truly are and go through this timeline leap, you have that level of awareness. So I can look at that moment when I am about to override myself and say, is this true? Is this really what I want? Do I have this to offer? And then the people that couldn't hold my honesty fell away, like that ex fell away. Haven't run into him for a couple of years. But to be honest, that part wasn't easy. What grew in that space, they left something that I hadn't expected, right? So the relationships that I'd struggled with the most, honestly, my daughter, my mother, two women that I love with my whole heart and have bumped up against me for most of my life, began to change. This part is wild. Not because I was working harder at them, but not because I tried to fix it or understand them better even, or communicate more skillfully, really, but because I stopped pouring from an empty vessel in their direction and started filling myself first. So I noticed, yes, those inauthentic relationships like the exes, fake friends, fell away. And the energy I reclaimed went inward. So when I engage with my daughter, I engage with a full cup. And from the inside, it moved outward differently. It was cleaner. It's like without the undercurrent of resentment or the exhaustion of performance. My daughter and I began to meet each other from a new place. And this is huge because we had gone through many years of tension. And then my mother, who had been the hardest relationship of my life, I think I've talked about this before, but it will definitely be in my book. We softened towards each other in a way that I never thought possible. I literally never thought I could have a harmonic relationship with my mom. Talk about we choose our parents, right? We choose our parents. We come into this world and many of us choose really hard experiences because our soul's like, yeah, I'm going to learn these lessons. I'm going to get it done, right? And we don't realize how much shadow work we have to go through in that process. But that's how you've gone through timeline leaps too, when a relationship that you thought would never heal is harmonic. I mean, I just am floored to even have this relationship be so harmonious in my life. Like my mom is somebody I can call every day and I feel very comfortable talking to at this point. And I never thought that would happen, ever. We've softened towards each other in ways that we just wouldn't have imagined. And she feels the same way. You just can't manufacture this kind of shift, really. You can only become, here's the key word, available for it. That's the fine tuning. That's what clears the channel, back to the radio analogy. That's what makes you present enough to notice when the radio says your word back to you before you even merged onto the highway. That's what puts you on the back roads in the rain, unhurried, open, ready to receive whatever frequency is about to come through. You have to know yourself before you can trust what you're receiving. So back to that Shakespeare quote, to thine own self be true. To thine own self be true. I think, was that from Hamlet? Either way, Shakespeare also writes in the iambic pentameter, which is boom, 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 the heartbeat. If you read Shakespeare, it's like in the rhythm of the heartbeat. And I still don't love Shakespeare. It's still hard for me to understand, even as an former English major. But I love the rhythm of it, the fact that it flows with the heart. 5D people, we're talking about the fifth dimension, pure unconditional love. And that comes from putting yourself first, as in knowing yourself, really knowing yourself, not the performing okayness version, but the actual, honest, cellular truth of who you are and what you have and what you need. That is sovereignty, my friend. That is the work. That is what it means to love yourself, And when you love yourself that way, like honestly, without performance, you become capable of loving the whole world more than, honestly, truly than all the fawning and overgiving ever allowed. Because you're finally giving something real. All right, drum roll there. Back to Tuesday, bum, bum, bum. Your body knows before your mind does. Okay. Around the time COVID arrived, something shifted in my right knee. Honestly, this is the trippy part of the story. There was this patch of dry skin that appeared on the surface of my right knee. It was tight, strange, resistant to everything I put on it. I even went to a dermatologist, creams, salves, nothing helped it. Nothing touched it. Behind the knee, I had this deep pulling ache that traveled from my glute all the way down to my foot. Okay. I iced it. I elevated it. I stretched it with yoga. I flexed it. I did infrared sauna for it. I had acupuncture for it. Everything you could think of. And I thought it was sciatica. I thought it was hamstring, referred pain. Nothing cleared it. No expert helped. Nothing resolved it. Okay. Because honestly, my body wasn't malfunctioning. It was transmitting. I do believe in the multiverse theory of ourselves that some of these injuries travel across lifetimes or, versions of ourselves, if you will. And there's what I'm talking about with the transmission. So my knee had been talking for years. It was like different versions of myself, right? Were kind of colliding. It was trying to say something that doesn't have a clean medical name. The diagnosis kept shifting. I got diagnosed with a Baker's cyst and now osteoarthritis because the language is trying to catch up with what the body already knows. Some symptoms aren't pathology. They're residue, okay? They're residue. The body holds the frequency of where you've been. When you shift timelines, especially rapidly, when you do the slow, unglamorous work of choosing differently long enough that the field around you actually changes, the body doesn't always update cleanly. I think this is a perfect metaphor. It's like thinking about a computer update. It carries the old signal for a while, a patch of skin that won't resolve, for example, a joint that remembers a heavier life. A tightness that keeps asking, do you remember when you were trying to disappear? I remember. I just don't live there anymore, right? After the appointment, I drove to my mom's to pick up my nephew and my daughter. And at my doctor's appointment, they actually gave me a cortisone shot in my knee. And this is the crazy thing. Since I've had the cortisone shot, since I had that experience in the car with the radio, saying osteoarthritis the moment it was coming into my mind, my itchy skin is gone. That patch of skin is resolved. So I drove to pick up my nephew and my daughter. As I said, I had a cat sit to get to, and my daughter had been wanting, another skateboard. She had one at her dad's. She kept forgetting to bring it to my house. And I was like, oh, it'd be so great if you had one at my house, right? So we drove past the house that I grew up in, and my nephew said he'd never seen it. I was floored by that because I'm like, I know my sister's driven by, but either way, I was like, okay, well, we're going to go see it. So we drove slowly past, and I felt the beautiful ache of it. There's really just nostalgia with no bitterness in it, even though I don't love the color that they painted the house. It was this tan gingerbread house. Now it's painted this kind of deep sea green, I guess. But I just felt this sense of sweetness, going by the house. And about 5 houses down, there was some stuff on the curb that caught my eye. And I drove past it, and then I thought I saw a skateboard. So I did a K-turn and went back, and there were not just one skateboard, there were 4 of them. And the guy who lived there actually walked out while my daughter and nephew were trying out the skateboards. And he was a really nice guy, very unhurried, very generous. He said, oh yeah, my kids have outgrown these, and have them take all they want. And then he had a couple other things, brand new tents and tomato cages and pots for the garden, which I had actually been manifesting since last year. He was like, oh, here, take all these, which is kind of ironic. This also shows you when you have these timeline leaps, time is an illusion. It really is. Like last summer, I wanted to have this tomato garden. Okay. I got one tiny green tomato at the very end of the summer because my neighbors had these trees that were blocking the sunlight. Well, my daughter and I went on a vacation, like 14 days in the Catskills, And when we came back, the neighbors had actually cut down most of the trees, except for my friend's favorite, very most straight trunked tree I've ever seen. They left that tree, but they cut down the trees. So now there's actually sun coming in. So I thought, oh, we weren't meant to have the tomato garden last summer, So now I have 5 tomato cages to plant tomatoes this year. And I just thought that was wild. This is what I mean about timelines. Sometimes the alignment is warp speed, like the word comes back through the radio before you've merged onto the highway, right? Just as it pops into your head. And then sometimes it takes a freaking year, You plant the intention, the season passes, you let yourself believe maybe it wasn't real, right? And then one afternoon you do a K-turn on your childhood street, and what you need is sitting right there, calm as anything, like it knew you were coming. As we drove away, I told my daughter, you're a really strong manifester. Look at that, The kids left with 3 skateboards between them. My daughter took 2, one for each house, and she's got a 3rd now too, so she can have a friend skate with her at her dad's or my house. And my daughter said, yeah, I know. I know I'm a good manifester. And I thought about her other wish. That one's taken longer. She wants really good friends. And I thought how cool that, the universe has blessed you with several skateboards. Real ones. She wants the kind you skate with. She loves the movie It because of the strong group of friends in that movie. And that's something that she fantasizes about, having that group that you skate with or bike with and hang out with and have all kinds of core memories with. And this is something she's been manifesting for years, and it hasn't come quickly, but the universe just gave her these 2 extra skateboards. And I found myself thinking, maybe those are placeholders. Maybe there are 2 kids out there on this new timeline who are going to love hanging out and skating with my daughter. Some things arrive in an afternoon, and some things arrive in the shape of what's coming. I actually love that sentiment. Some things arrive in the shape of what's coming. So I'm just going to let that sit with you, dear listener, because everything that we are asking for is being heard. But there's a difference between asking from your ego, right? That's constantly wanting to control. That's my codependent self that was masking and people pleasing and, trying to honestly disappear, trying to get out of people's way or just appease. And that I was ignoring myself in so many ways. But then I know when my soul's talking because she's loud, she's like, I'm going to publish 3 books. I have 3 projects that are waiting to get out there right now. And that is my contribution to this 5th dimension reality right now. This is wisdom that my soul needs to share, and this is not coming from my ego. I guess this is how I delineate it, because there are people that are like, I want to have a bestseller. Why do you want to have a bestseller? Because I want to be popular. I want to be well known. Okay. Well, what do you want to write about? Whatever people want to buy, right? But when the soul has a mission, it's like, I am an emissary for my soul song. I'm an emissary for this God force energy. I want to share the wisdom that I know I came here to share on this planet. And that might mean, like Jared Ray Gilmore, that one day, your Instagram platform goes viral. He went from 100 followers to, 100,000. And that is a platform that the universe wants him to use. That might mean something different for somebody else. When the soul is singing its full song in this human body, these are what happens with these timeline leaps. The frequency clears, right? The static removes itself. And we know what the next step is. Sometimes it is just, I'm choosing to drive a different route, right? I'm going to go down my childhood street, which I didn't have to go down, but I felt the heartfelt desire to do it. And there are some objects I've been asking for. Maybe if I want to publish a book, I feel drawn to go to some kind of writer's group, and I happen to meet somebody that connects me with an agent. We get in a conversation. They're like, hey, what you're interested in writing about, I have a friend that's actually looking for material. Could I connect you? If that happens, I'll let you know. This is just popping out of my psyche right now. It's a synchronistic experience, right? So that same evening after the skateboards and the tomato cages and the childhood street, my daughter didn't want to leave the library. we went to the library on the way to run some errands, and I left her there. She was like, I'm really into reading right now. So I left for a half an hour, did my stuff, and then came back. And I ended up just sinking into a chair, or she was sinking into a chair deep inside a book. And I was really excited to see her, like, so immersed. So I was like, all right, let me wander around the stacks, which I love to do. And I'm just going to peruse some books. So I ended up like getting a stack of books. And then I kind of made a game of stalking my daughter through the stacks, like hiding behind shelves, poking my eyes over the books to get her to smile. And, you know, it's fun to find ways to like bond with my teenager. We finally left the library, and I don't like to drive it when it's dark now. Just something, my eyes don't love the dark as much as they used to. And it was a very ominous day, but when we got out of the library, the sky wasn't as dark as I feared. The rain had softened everything. It had been one of those like really gray, rainy days. And I honestly felt really relaxed in a way I hadn't expected. I was like loose and full, the way you'd feel at the end of a day that honestly gave you more than what you planned for, in a good way. So we ended up taking the back roads to the house that we were pet sitting at. I always prefer the back roads. They're slower, they're quieter. There's less of a feeling of being carried by the traffic, and like more of that feeling of actually like mindfully going somewhere. And it was still raining steadily. And honestly, it was beautiful. Like the kind of driving that asks nothing of you and lets you just kind of be inside the movement. So again, I put the radio on, and then a song that I loved came through. We rode with it. And then maybe 5 or 10 minutes from the house, as we drove further from my neighborhood, deeper into the neighboring suburb where I was dog sitting, the static shifted on the radio. There's a station that doesn't come in clearly where I live, because there's too much sprawl, too many signals competing. But as we moved through the rain toward this house, kind of out in the boondocks, something changed. The fuzz thinned, the frequency sharpened, and then a voice came through, warm and unhurried and unmistakable. Delilah After Dark. Remember her? I remember her from high school. Late nights, slow songs, people calling in with their longing and their heartbreak, and Delilah holding all of it like it mattered, because to her, it always did. I thought, man, she's still at it? When did I graduate? 96, and we're in 2026 now. Delilah's still at it. And then I thought, but this isn't the Delilah I remember. Timeline leap. This one was different. She was deeper, like she'd done her own work between then and now. My daughter and I didn't say anything. We just listened. Open ears, open chest, the rain coming down and the back roads unspooling, and the signal getting clearer the closer we got to where we were going. A caller came on. He said he'd been imprisoned for 11 years. He met a woman at a diner he had deep affection for, but he was holding his past shame like a stone in each hand, too heavy to reach toward her. Delilah said to the listener, "Look down at your finger. Look at those lines right now. Is there anyone else in the world with that same pattern?" Silence. "Of course not." She said, "Every fingerprint is unique, just like every soul." So she gave the listener advice. She said, get yourself to the highest state possible. Take care of your body, your mind, your heart. Get connected with who you truly are, aka know thyself. There's another fingerprint out there that fits perfectly into yours. But first, you have to have a relationship with your higher power. Not church, not religion, a relationship, because that's really what it's about. He started crying. He said, I've been in church all my life, but I don't really have a relationship with God. Talk about masking, right? Many people perform that relationship without really genuinely forming it. She was basically telling this guy, you got to love yourself first, dude, And he said, Delilah, I really needed to hear this. Forgive yourself, she said. Your past is your past. You are exactly where you're meant to be. You are exactly who you are meant to be. Soul frequency, right? Own it. When it ended, my daughter said, wow, that was really really powerful. I was already crying. I know. I said, wasn't that beautiful? I don't remember Delilah being that spiritual. But here's what I think, my friend, dear listener. In the multiverse theory, all versions of ourselves exist simultaneously. Every timeline, every frequency, every choice already made and unmade. The ego can't fathom that, so it creates a story, or it understands it through feeling, through a Tuesday afternoon that gives you skateboards and tomato cages and late night radio show that goes from static to clear the closer you get to where you're going. Maybe the Delilah I knew on the last timeline was shallower. Maybe this one is exactly as deep as she needs to be for where I am now, which tells me everything about where I am. And if you're here listening to this, feeling something move in your chest that you can't quite name yet, then it tells me something about where you are too, my friend. We didn't change the station. We drove toward the clarity. Let that land. I've got tingles. We didn't change the station. We drove toward the clarity. That's the whole thing. That's the practice. You won't always feel the leap when it's happening. You'll feel it like you're just driving home in the rain, taking the back roads, letting your daughter stay at the library a little longer than planned. And then one day you'll look up and realize the signal is clear, the voice is coming through, saying exactly what you needed, and the obstacle that blocked your light removed itself while you were away. Trust the frequency you're on. Trust the static when it comes. It means change is near. Trust the clarity when it arrives. It means you're getting closer. And when Delilah comes through after dark, clean and clear and deeper than you remembered, don't change the station. On this new timeline, my knee is more mobile, that dry skin patch is gone, and my daughter is becoming a skater. And the radio is our guidepost. We're walking each other home. And if you're a regular listener, I would love to hear from you. Part of the fifth dimension is relationships. It's our relationship with the divine, our embodiment of our own soul, which is the ultimate unconditional love leap. When we're in that space, we have no fear. And I want to be clear, it's not about fear versus love. It's not a battle. It's all love, even the fear, even the ego freaking out in the car on the way home from the doctor because it was late or missed the appointment. We can look at those moments with compassion because we understand what they were. A scared ego, unembodied, not yet fully inhabited by the soul, feeling like it had to control everything, grasping, calculating, trying to manage an experience it was never designed to manage alone. And that image takes me somewhere. Do you remember the show Quantum Leap? It was on in the early 90s. Scott Bakula, I'm going to go back to the 90s again, just like Delilah, who played Dr. Sam Beckett, a physicist who kept leaping into other people's bodies across different points in time. And every single time he landed somewhere new, he would freak out, right? He would look in the mirror and see someone else's face. He'd be disoriented, grasping for footing, trying to figure out who he was supposed to be in this new place. And I always think about that when I think about timeline leaps from the ego's perspective, because that's exactly what it feels like when the ego is the one driving. It's like the ego is aware that something has shifted. It can feel the new frequency and it panics. But ultimately, in the show, Quantum Leap, and in life, when the soul takes the lead, the ego takes the back seat. The fear doesn't have the same power anymore. You can look at disorientation with the eyes of love. You can say, I see you. I know why you were scared. We're okay now. That's the leap completing itself. And I want to emphasize that. You have that moment of disorientation and you can say, I don't know if Scott Bakula ever did in Quantum Leap, I see you. I know why you're scared, We're okay now. That is the quantum leap or the timeline leap completing itself. That being said, I really, dear listener, do want to hear from you. I have my link tree in every RSS feed. You can look at the description. I add my website, my link tree, and it's also on my YouTube, which is a great way to find me. I I have an email list on my website, I wanted to say. So, but you can follow me on YouTube and leave a comment or find my email through my link tree. This work is about personal relationship. It's about connection. It's about the fifth dimension being at its core relational between you and yourself, you and the divine, and you and the people walking alongside you on this road, like me, with you. And speaking of that, I'm also excited to start sharing some interviews like I did with Jared Ray Gilmore yesterday, the ones that I did a few years ago, but I'm also excited to start doing more. Like I needed this couple-year break to go inward and unmask myself, if you will. But if there's a topic that you, listener, or you know of somebody that wants to explore, having anything to do with heart-based living, with sovereignty, with the kind of embodied spiritual life that we talk about here, reach out to me. I would genuinely love to chat. That's what this is, a conversation, an ongoing, evolving, real one. And for those that can't access the website or do better auditory, my name is Sarah Lamb, right? I go by Sarah Teresa, but my email is simply lambsarah, LAMBSARAH @gmail.com. So you can just message me there. When the station is clear, my friend, when the frequency finally comes through without the interference, without the fuzz, without you having to strain to hear it, that is the feeling of arriving in yourself. And I feel like I'm walking home. I'm so glad that you're walking home with me, my friends. Until next time, please share this with anyone who resonates. That's how we share the frequency. That's how the signal spreads. I'm so happy to walk home with you. And peace, love, and light. This is Sarah with the 5D codes signing out.